Hey, so today we want to start on translating verbal phrases to algebraic expressions, and we're also going to do some algebraic equations. So the key thing is that we need to start by identifying keywords. We're identifying the keywords that indicate the operation. So when we have a phrase written in English, we can translate it to algebra only if we identify which keywords and we know what those words mean. After we identify the keywords, then we can write the numbers and the variables. The variables are usually represented by a letter like T or X or N. And so we're going to go ahead and get started just jumping right in. I'm going to give you a first example. The sum of 2 and 7. If you saw the phrase the sum of 2 and 7, the sum would mean addition. So we're going to go ahead and write 2 plus 7. Next, we have the difference of. So what about the difference of 3 and a number? Whenever you hear the phrase a number, what we want to do is we want to use a letter to represent that, because when we say a number, we can't know for sure that it's a 7 or a 5, so we represent it with a variable. So I'm going to use X every time today when I say the word number. If I need to use multiple variables, then I might use X and Y or A and B and C, okay? But I like to use X because it doesn't look like a number at all. So if I go ahead and say the difference of a 3 and a number, difference means subtraction. So I say the difference of 3 minus X. The difference of 3 and a number would be 3 minus X. The product of 6 and a number. If I say the product of 6 and a number, the product means multiply. So I'm going to multiply 6 times X. And we can write that as 6 times X with a little dot, because in algebra, remember, we use a dot for multiplication. The quotient of, how about the quotient of 5 and 7? Now, the quotient of 5 and 7 means I'm going to write 5 divided by 7. Quotient means division. So, as a refresher, the sum is plus, difference is minus, product is times, and quotient is division. Not too bad. Let's see a few verbal phrases here. Our first one, the sum of 8 and t. We're going to say 8 plus t. Go ahead and write down this first example on your notes. So we have sum, difference, product, and quotient. So our first one, sum, is 8 plus t. Try the quotient of g and 15. Go ahead and write it down. I'm going to let you write it, then I'm going to write it in just a second. The quotient of g and 15. So we identify the keyword is quotient, and then we're going to go ahead and write down the variable and the number. The next one, the product of 5 and b. And our fourth one, the difference of 32 and x. Try to write it down. 32 minus x. So those are probably not brand new words. You've probably heard sum and difference and product and quotient before. I'm going to toss in two that actually do something special. Our next key words are less than and more than. The thing with less than and more than is their subtraction and addition, which you probably guessed, except these two switch the order of the terms. Very, very important that you get this. They switch the order of the terms. So, unlike difference and sum, when we use less than or more than, we have to put it in the other order. For example, the phrase $5 less than Jennifer earned, we have the key words being less than, but since less than switches the order, we're not going to say 5 minus D. We have to switch the order, so we're going to say D minus 5. And you see I wrote that right here. Now I use D for dollars, dollars that Jennifer earned. Okay. Whenever we're translating into math, if they don't give us a letter and they don't tell us what the letter is, we can pick whatever we want. But a lot of times it's good practice to go ahead and say, hey, this letter, the letter D in this case, it means this. All right, let's write down number 5. 8 more than X. More than means we're going to switch the order. So instead of starting with 8, we're going to start with X. More than means plus 8. Number 6 is 6 less than P. That means we're going to switch the order. So I'm going to put these in reverse. P minus 6. Number 7 is 14 less than P. If I go ahead and do that math, I get F not P, F minus 14. Number 8, P more than 10. So I'm going to switch the order. 10 plus P. Number 9. Number 9 says 3 more runs than. Okay. So they tossed a word in between there to see if it would trip us up. So we still have more than, but what do we have more of? We have more runs. So we could have said 3 runs more than the Pirates, but in English, we don't always follow the same rules. We have a lot of flexibility. So instead of saying 3 runs more than the Pirates scored, the more than has been split. But that it still means we're going to have to switch the order. It's kind of a weird phrase. It doesn't just tell us the letter. Since it gave us a real situation, we're going to use a variable for the runs the Pirates scored. So I'm going to go ahead and write down R equals runs Pirates scored. Now that I have defined the variable, I'm going to go ahead and say R plus 3. Again, I have to switch the order because it says more than. So I use runs the Pirates scored plus 3. Number 10, 12 less than some number. So again, it's letting us pick. So we're just going to go ahead and pick X. So far we've looked at our basics. Just write them down by identifying the keyword, but also we need to occasionally put in a variable. Sometimes we need to define our variable and say what it equals when we have a real world situation. And if it says than, we need to switch the order. Let's look at a few more examples. This time we're going to look at equals. So whenever we have the words is, equals, or is equal to, all of those we're just going to substitute with the equal sign. So these are getting a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to start looking for the words is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the word is in blue for all 6 of these. Is. Now when I go back through, if I were to look at where my is words are, I can see is equal to. So I'm going to go ahead and expand those to include the is equal to. Do any of them say equals? Not this time. All right, so that means wherever those are, I'm going to have an equals in this equation. So equals. I'm going to go ahead and put my equals underneath my is. And then the next thing we're going to look for is we're going to look for what are our key words. So in the first one we have younger than, which it actually doesn't say less than or more than, it says younger than. In number 12 it says higher than. Number 13 says more than. Number 14 says product. Number 15 says sum. And number 16 says quotient. So if we go back through these, I'm going to start actually on number 11, where it says Arthur is. So I have Arthur. But in order to make this work, I'm going to have to assign Arthur a variable. I'm going to give him a letter. I think the letter A, the capital A. So I'm going to say Arthur is a capital A. So in my equation, I have A equals, and then it says 8 years younger than. Anytime we have the word than, it means we want to switch the order. So instead of saying 8 minus, I'm actually going to say J minus 8. So this says Arthur is Janet minus 8 years. Okay, so in this case, we have Arthur and we've got Janet. So we've got two variables. Let's take a look at number 12. So we have Kelly's test score. So I'm going to say that Kelly's test score is K. And so I'm going to use K in my equation on the left side of the equal sign. And then it says 6 points higher than Mike's. So I'm going to use an M for Mike's test score. And then I'm going to go over and write M plus 6 because it's Mike's score and then hers is 6 points more than that. Number 13, 5 more than a number is 6. So again, we want to switch the order. It just says a number, so I'm going to use X. And then is 6. 6 is all by itself. Number 14, again, we have a number all by itself, 63. The product of 7 and B, product means multiply, so we do 7 times B. Remember that in algebra, we don't use an X for multiply, we use a little dot. Number 15, the sum of R and 45, so that means sum means add. So R plus 45, and it says it is 79. Number 16, the quotient of X and 7. So quotient means divide. We don't need to switch the order because it didn't use the word than. And it's equal to 13. We have a couple other keywords that we come across sometimes, and that's twice or double. Whenever you see the words twice or double, that means we need 2 times a number, or just simply multiply by 2. They all mean the same thing. If we see half, that means we need to divide that number by 2. We're going to cut it in half. So number 17, it says twice as many points as Bob. So when we say many points as Bob, how many points does Bob have? We don't know, so we're going to say B is how many points Bob has. And how many do I have? I have 2 times the number of points Bob has, 2 times B. So it says twice B. Next, we have half the age of Sally. So the age of Sally, we're going to say, I'm going to put an X. I'm not going to use an S because my S's and my 5s look a lot alike. And so I don't want to confuse whoever's reading it, like my teacher who might grade it wrong. If I use an S, they might misread it. So I'm going to put an X. And then the other word we have is half. So half means we divide it by 2. So I'm going to do X divided by 2. Notice that since I divided by 2, that kind of went on the end. So I said half, but I needed to put that at the end. So that's just like what we looked at for than. Next, we're going to write 2-step expressions and equations. We're going to get a little bit more complicated. These don't have these don't have names in them, so we're just going to use the letters that they give us, or we're going to use the letter X. And I'm just going to kind of highlight it as I go through it. So I'm going to highlight my two sides, and I'm going to stop at the is. So here we go. 6 less than the number X, and it says is 4. So I know what goes on my right side is going to be equals 4. I know I have an is 4. On the left side, it says 6 less than twice a number. So I actually have two parts. I have twice a number. Twice a number means I should have 2 times x. But I also have 6 less than. So I need to go ahead and also subtract by 6 because less than means I change the order. So instead of the 6 being first, the 6 is after that. So it says minus 6. And so I end up having two things happen. So I have the 2x minus 6 equals 4. On number 20, you have 4 more than the product of 2 and a. 4 more. So I don't have an equals to on this one, but I do have a more than, and I have the product. So when I try to do this, I'm going to do the part that's closest to my a first. My a is my big word there. The product of 2 and a. The product of 2 and a. This phrase at the end means 2 times a. 4 more than means I'm going to add 4. And the 4 has to go at the end. So we end up with 2 times a plus 4. Number 21, 9 times a number decreased by 4. I also, before I scroll, because I don't want you to miss it, before I scroll, I want to highlight that we have, you must use parentheses to x or divide. That x is multiplication. If we have a sum or difference and we're multiplying by a sum or difference, then we need to use parentheses. And we'll see that in just a minute. So in number 21, 9 times a number decreased by 4. So decreased by 4, 9 times a number. When we look at those two, that means we're doing two things. 9 times a number, and then we're decreasing it by 4. So decrease is going to be one of our words that means subtract. 2 less than the quotient of 15 and a number. 2 less than the quotient, 2 less than the quotient of 15 and a number. So we have two things happening. I'm going to go with the number part first. So the number part says the quotient of 15 and a number, 15 divided by a number. I'm going to use the number, the x, whenever it says a number. And then it says 2 less than that. So I'm going to have to subtract 2 at the end of that. Next, we have 5 times the sum, and this part's already underlined because it's meant to be a big hint. 5 times the sum of 6 and some number. So the reason we're highlighting this and we're underlining this is 5 times the sum of 6 and some number. We need to go ahead and do the 6 and some number. Well, what am I doing to the 6 and some number? Am I multiplying it by 5? No, I'm summing those. So the sum of 6 and some number, so 6 plus x. And then I'm multiplying 5 times the sum. So when it says multiply 5 times the sum, does that mean I'm multiplying it by the 6 or the x? And the truth is, it's multiplying by both. When we say 5 times the sum, we need to use parentheses around the 6 and the x, and then multiply by 5 in front of it. 5 times the sum. And that's really messy. So I'm going to rewrite this a little bit neater because my handwriting is really scratchy today. 5 times the sum of 6 and some number. Number 24, the quotient of 7 and D, so the quotient of 7 and D, decreased by 9. I'm going to do the first part. 7 divided by D, decrease, that's going to be subtract, by 9. Number 25, twice the difference of y and 3. Again, we have it underlined. So I am going to do the part with the variable first, the y and 3. What am I doing with the y and 3? I'm doing the difference of them, so it's y minus 3. And then we need to do twice the difference. Not twice y and not twice 3, but twice the difference. So I need to actually put parentheses around those and multiply it all by 2. Number 26, the difference of 9 and the quotient of s and 4. So the trouble here is to pick which one we're going to do first. So if we start by trying to do the difference of 9 and a number, well, difference means subtract. So I'm subtracting 9 and what? So it's 9 minus, what's the other thing I'm subtracting? Well, it says I'm subtracting by the quotient, which means I'm not just subtracting by 4 or s, I'm subtracting by those combined using the quotient. So I'm going to do s divided by 4. Well, negative 4, I believe it says negative 4. Next, we have the sum of 5 and the product of 7 and x. So the sum of 5 and the product of 7 and x. So we have to do the sum of 5. And what are we adding 5 to? It doesn't tell us. It tells us we're adding 5 to the product. So we need to multiply two things together. 7 times x. 28, 3 more than the quotient. So we have our first more than in this set. It means we're going to switch the order. So I'm going to go ahead and jump and do that right now. More than means plus, but in the other order. So instead of the 3 being at the beginning, it's going to go at the end. And then we need to do the quotient of 5 and a. Number 29, the product of 4 and the difference of x and 3. So it says the difference of x and 3. So I know that one. That's x minus 3. But the product of 4, that means 4 times, and we're multiplying 4, not times x, but the difference. So that means we need to put parentheses around it. Notice that we didn't have 4. It says the product of 4 and then it just kind of leaves it hanging. It doesn't tell us. Well, it tells us the difference. So that's when we need to combine it. The next one says the product of the difference of x and 3. So that means we're going to have to do the difference of x and 3 and then multiply it by 4. So the difference of x and 3 is going to be x minus 3. And then we're going to have to multiply that by 4.